Free males were dominant in ancient Greek society. They fought in wars, were citizens of the polis, and were educated. The qualities valued in males were wit, poetry, self-control, bravery, affection, courage, loyalty, and respect. A practice for males in those times was pedestry, which means love for boys. Young men were encouraged to have a homosexual relationship with younger boys. It was seen as preparation for manhood. After the age of 30, men were expected to enter into a heterosexual marriage and remain monogamous. Monogamy as opposed to the harem of other cultures of the time. Each man paid for his own armor and weapons, spear, sword, body armor, and their military formations were called phalanx, and the unit of fighters were called hoplites. The lives of females were very different. Girls learned spinning wool and making cloth. They were expected to bear children and to care for the dead. Both dealt with blood, which was considered polluted, and men were not to touch. The qualities valued in females were modesty, obedience, and restraint, and their social life involved only other women and children. They were expected to marry in their teens, as soon as they could have children, to men in their 30s. A female was not considered a woman until she had borne her first child. That was an event for women only, as it was too bloody for men. Slavery existed in ancient Greece, and they often came from people who had been conquered by the Greeks. Some were even Greeks. Slaves made up to 1/4 to 1/3 of the workforce. They were considered chattel or property with no rights, and if they were able to save enough money, they could purchase their freedom. When it came to religion, Greek gods had human characteristics and features unlike all the animal gods in other cultures. Greeks chose a god or two to believe in and to be loyal to. They were not expected to follow all the gods. It's unclear how much the Greeks actually believed in their own gods. It could be that the earliest Greeks believed, and as time went on, there was less belief. Many myths contained social mores and were not really practiced, like cannibalism and human sacrifice. They did make for good stories, though. Oracles played a role. We'll cover that in more depth later, but just keep in mind that many Greeks would make offerings at temples, hoping to receive a prophecy in return. The ancient Greeks believed in magic and in the spirits of the dead. We'll cover that more as well. They also believed in prophets, seers, and the value of dreams. Let me say one more thing about Linear B that we covered for the late Bronze Age. I mentioned that it didn't represent a spoken language, but rather an accounting of offerings. From it, we see lists of God's names that we assume offerings were made to. If you look at the slide, you'll see God's names like Zeus and Hera, Artemis and Dionysus. That lets you see how far back in Greek history these gods go. Now that we've laid the foundation, we'll next begin exploring the myths, starting with how the world was formed.